unfolded in a simpler but no less perilous era than the one the United States faces today. It was a time when the nation was frightened by the emergence of a new and powerful foreign enemy. At first, we knew little about the exact dimensions of the Soviet threat and feared the worst. Unable to see how many warplanes and missiles the Kremlin was building, we assumed the numbers were great and growing larger every day. The only way to answer such an unfathomable threat, it seemed, was to devote the national treasure to building ever greater and more expensive defenses, even at the risk of damaging the American economy and creating what Dwight Eisenhower described as a garrison state. That debilitating path was largely skirted, due in no small measure to the ingenuity and industry of the architects of the new espionage technologies. Looking back at the Eisenhower era, it is clear that a rare combination of circumstances encouraged innovation in defense and intelligence technologies. Whether that environment can be replicated today to help deal with new threats is unclear. The Eisenhower presidency, 1953 to 1961, has often been depicted as a time of muddled leadership. But I found in the area of military and intelligence technology that Dwight Eisenhower was a visionary leader with a high tolerance for risk. In these fields, Eisenhower was confident in his judgments, open to new ideas, respectful of the contributions science could make, and wary of the Pentagon's conventional thinking and stifling bureaucracy. Throughout his presidency, Eisenhower repeatedly bet on daring new defense technologies, often rejecting the recommendations of cabinet members and the established institutions of Washington, including the military services. When things went wrong, which they often did during the development and testing phase of new projects, he didn't flinch. The result was a formidable array of new spy systems and weapons, including exotic spy planes and satellites, nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and nuclear warheads compact enough to fit atop missiles. All in all, it was a time of landmark advances in defense, a record unequaled by 9 subsequent presidents. Eisenhower, unlike most of his successors, gave high-powered scientists frequent access to the Oval Office and invited them to provide independent advice and a fresh perspective on research and development projects. He paid close attention to what they told him. When the Pentagon or other government agencies failed to produce inventive ideas, or neglected the ones they had, men like James R. Killian, the president of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Edwin Land, the creator of instant photography, urged Eisenhower to look at unconventional proposals, like the plans for the ungainly U-2 spy plane, or a no-frills spy satellite that returned its exposed film to Earth. The productive collaboration between government and science, which carried over into the Kennedy administration, was sundered by the Vietnam War. It has never been fully rebuilt. Once Eisenhower settled on a spy project, even one that involved airplanes or rockets, he turned it over to the CIA to manage, figuring the Pentagon was too cumbersome to handle it and too porous to keep it secret. Only a retired 5-star general could get away with that, or know instinctively that it was the smart thing to do. As the World War II Supreme Commander in Europe and a national hero, Eisenhower had the clout and nerve to give the CIA the leading role in the creation of reconnaissance planes and spy satellites. The projects would not have been possible without the help of the Air Force, including the loan of top officers to help run the programs. But Eisenhower understood that the armed services were too bureaucratic and cautious to develop heretical new technologies on their own. At the CIA, Eisenhower found an unexpectedly agile partner for his spy pursuits. Though Allen Dulles, the director of Central Intelligence at the time, was not technology-minded, the agency sprang into action once the White House made clear the CIA was going into the aircraft and satellite business. Under the direction of Richard M. Bissell, Jr., who is better known for his stewardship of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba in 1961, the agency proved to be an effective manager of advanced technology projects. By today's more exacting standards, Bissell's operation would probably be closed down after a few days for lack of administrative controls and a failure to micromanage contractors such as Lockheed and General Electric that had signed on to build the new machines. There were few rules, little paperwork, and accounting procedures that would doubtless give congressional committees a fit today. But it all somehow worked smoothly, and in the case of the U-2, ahead of schedule and under budget. The big defense contractors themselves seemed more supple and inventive than they are today. Unfortunately, the gusher of espionage innovation during the Eisenhower years, and another burst of creativity in the 1960s and 1970s, were not followed by a similar period of technological advancement in the 1990s that might have helped the Central Intelligence Agency and Federal Bureau of Investigation home in on Mohammed Atta and his fellow hijackers as they prepared for their assault on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11, 2001. Ironically, one of the reasons Washington was unprepared for Osama bin Laden was that over the years it had come to rely heavily on spy satellites and other sophisticated hardware. The machines, which were made for tracking Soviet missiles and tanks, were not as adept at monitoring terrorist plots. The high cost of building and operating satellites also consumed such a large chunk of the intelligence budget that more conventional espionage activities tended to be short-changed. This included the maintenance of a worldwide corps of experienced field officers who might have a chance to penetrate terrorist groups. And the giant intelligence organizations which grew up around spy satellites were hobbled by senseless bureaucratic rivalries and independent reporting channels that impeded efforts to pull together signs of terrorist activity when they were detected by different agencies. My interest in the development and impact of spy satellites was stirred shortly after I began covering the CIA and its fellow spy agencies for the New York Times in 1979. One day, I got a call from an official in the Carter administration. He told me the president of South Korea, Park Chung-hee, had been assassinated during a bloody coup d'etat that day. When I checked the news wires, there was nothing about the incident. Nor had the foreign desk of the Times heard anything from a correspondent who happened to be in Seoul, the South Korean capital. As a newcomer to the intelligence beat and the Times, I began to worry that I had raised a false alarm. Soon the paper was preparing to order up 3 or 4 stories about a news event that had yet to be confirmed or reported anywhere. Several hours later, news of the assassination finally flashed across the wire services. I later learned that the original information about the killing had come from the interception of South Korean military communications channels by sophisticated American listening devices, and that top Carter administration officials had been notified as soon as word reached Washington. As months passed and I developed sources at the CIA and other agencies, I found that the great preponderance of critical intelligence data flowing into Washington came from satellites and other technological devices. The massing of Soviet forces on the Afghan border in 1979, the indication that an invasion was imminent, had been tracked by spy satellite. When Soviet troops assembled for a possible invasion of Poland in December 1980, satellite photographs helped to alert Washington. When I learned of sensitive information about American collection systems, the CIA and the White House were quick to ask the Times to delay publication, a request we sometimes honored to prevent the exposure of operations that seemed vital to American national security.